'Tis I, Edgar Allan Poe, and it has come to my attention that you would like to hear some details of my life thus far. So here we go. I began in 1809. I was born to a mother and a father in the dead of winter, and then what became dead was my mother. And then my father left because he couldn't stand the sight of a baby with no hair, so I grew hair, and then I was adopted by a family named the Allens. Just kidding, they didn't adopt me. They just gave me their name, and to make matters worse, we lived in Virginia, and also a bird was there. But then things started to look up, dear reader, for I ended up at the University of Virginia. And when I say look up, I mean look down even further. I was so lonely. Everybody was there doing great dances, and I hate dancing. All of the dances I would sit on the quad instead and read all of the books. So I left. After I had read all of the books, I packed up my things and put them on my shoulder, and I went back home to tell my parents the business. And they said, "Why are you leaving university?" And I said, "Because I have more important things to do. I have a calling." And they said, "What is that calling?" And I said, "I will find out soon enough." And they said, "No, you won't." And I said, "You're not my real parents." So, dear reader, that's when I left Virginia. I found out that my childhood sweetheart was engaged to another man, so I moved to Boston, where I became a newspaper man, and I turned pages, and I wrote more pages, and then I was looking for jobs, and I found one. A clerk. A clerk! Surely this would be my calling. But no, I was still very sad, very aimless. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I moped around until an army recruiter just put a gun in my hand and said, "Join the army." And I said, "Well, yeah, I don't, yeah, oh, well, okay." But I stayed up nights because I was only interested in dwelling on my own loneliness. So I wrote poem after poem after poem and published 50 copies of a poetry book. But it was not enough. I was still very sad. All I wanted to do was write my poetry. So I took my bird and I went to the army and I said, "I want out." And they said, "No, not until you reconcile with your family." And I said, that sounds pretty weird. That's none of your business. But my family wouldn't have it. Then my foster mother died. And I went home to the funeral to reconcile with my father. And I said, "This is a sad situation." And we reconciled. Still aimless, I enrolled in West Point Academy, which in hindsight seems like a horizontal move, but I was still very sad. I still kept writing, and I wanted to publish another book, but I couldn't afford it. So I raised money from friends, 75 cents each, and eventually I had $150, which means two things. One, I invented Kickstarter, and two, I had many, many friends. And so I dedicated my book to my friends, and they were very happy about it. And I was happy. And I realized that my true life's calling was writing poetry. And so I took it upon myself to do anything within my capabilities to get kicked out of West Point Academy. I played many pranks, all of which involved chairs, and the pulling of chairs, some of the best days of my life, dear reader. And eventually it worked. I was kicked right out of there, but to me it felt more like I was flying, like I was finally free. And I celebrated my newfound freedom by moving to Baltimore, which, as it turns out, dear reader, is no way to celebrate anything. If you learn one thing from my life, it is do not go to Baltimore. So I took off from Baltimore, and I said I must to Philadelphia at once. And, I mean, it's a pretty nice place, but let's face it, it is no New York City, which is where I ended up. It's a great place. You should go there. Ah, yes, here is my 13-year-old cousin, Virginia. She's a lovely girl, and her name is Virginia, which holds some special significance to me. So yes, you know, we got married, which... times were different, okay? Just don't judge me. And it was then, dear reader, that I wrote my masterpiece, The Raven. Perhaps you've heard of it. If not, here's a little ditty from it. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. Doesn't that just paint a scene? And dear reader, the critics went bananas. Look at them. They were just crazy for it. You might say they were raving about it. It was a good time in my life. I smiled sometimes. I felt fulfilled, but not for long. For you see, my 13-year-old wife was a wonderful piano player and singer and songstress, and she was one night tickling the ivories when an ominous cough befell her, and some red splotches of horrible blood fell upon the keys. You know where this is going? Yes. Back to the cemetery. Back to bury another woman. Oh, death, you have come to me again. And everything was inky blackness or inky grayness. And so I decided that I would live by myself in a house that sort of looked like me. Ah, yes, just me alone in a house. If you're anything like me, dear reader, then you've experienced soul-crushing loneliness. And so there I was, just pent up in a house, writing, and writing. And here's me, a picture of me actually doing this draw my life. How meta. And here is a ghost that used to haunt me, but she left, just like everyone. And all I loved alone. And now I have drawn my life, YouTube, and I am Poe. Good day. No, wait, here's some stuff you might enjoy. It's a sketch of